And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Monday, September 15th, 2025. And taking a look at the state of the sea ice, we are near or at minimal ice extent and coverage, and we've already started to see way north of Utqiagvik up in the Arctic Ocean. You have to go like over 500 miles to the north. Some early season ice just beginning to develop, but at this point we're right near that minimum sea ice, and as we head into early October, we should start to see some early ice begin to form along sections of the Arctic coast. So in the meantime, still there around the minimum, and more importantly, looking at the active weather we have. This low pressure here sitting along the North Pacific Gulf interface has pretty active weather with it. We have a scattering of showers and a few low-top thunderstorms, but there's another push of moisture coming up into the Panhandle. There's another low that's going to cross the eastern Gulf and then pull back to the north and west, and as a result, it's going to bring gale force winds with perhaps even some storm force gusts, along with periods of moderate to, at times, heavy rain, and that'll be moving up in through the Panhandle, especially as we head into later Tuesday night and Wednesday. We all have ongoing rain, and it's actually going to rain pretty good here on the west end of Prince William Sound, the eastern Kenai Peninsula, later this Monday night and into Tuesday. And then back to the west, we have another low sitting out here just to the northwest of Shimia, the western Aleutians. That low is going to slide along the lower Bering Sea and the Aleutians, pulling a front across, and then that energy is all going to help kind of translate up toward the Gulf, and we're just going to get this one larger low circulation by the end of the week and early weekend. So it's going to stay quite active along areas of the Aleutians, lower Alaska Peninsula, especially the Gulf Coast into the Panhandle. We'll see periods of wind along with moderate to at times some heavier rainfall. Meanwhile, drier, quieter weather along the west coast, even some sun. The interior, also seeing some areas of clearing, but also we have some cloudiness and temperatures that are fall time cool, as would be expected. But here's the low Tuesday. This low is going to be pivoting back toward the north and northwest. This front coming upward will have a push of significantly mild and wet air. So temperatures Tuesday afternoon along the southern Panhandle could get up into the mid-upper 60s. And as this system arrives, you're going to have some stronger winds, especially along the outer Panhandle coast and northeastern Gulf Coast outside of Yakutat Bay to along Cape Suckling. Meanwhile, this low here down near 977 millibars in the southwest corner of the Bering will continue heading east-southeastward, and eventually all this energy will be translating east-southeastward and getting kind of incorporated into a larger low circulation in this area late in the week and early weekend. So Wednesday, very wet here along the northeastern Gulf Coast, northern Panhandle, some moderate and heavy rainfall, 2 to 4 inches of rain common with some orographic enhancement. That is when you get that really moist air and the rain run into and right up the mountains there. That enhances the rainfall rate, so some areas could see 6 inches of rain. And then back to the west, we find the system out here along and just north of the Aleutians weakening a bit with a secondary low taking shape south of the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians, and eventually that low is going to head northeastward and become part of the next system that will impact the Gulf here at the end of the week. In the meantime, inner channels, got north winds 20 knots, 2-3 foot waves there, Lynn Canal. However, as we get further south, there could be gusts to 35 knots there across Stevens Passage, and then Dixon Entrance, 25 to 30 knot southeast winds on Tuesday. Waves 6 feet or so around Metlakatla and Ketchikan and the outer coast. Easterly gales of 35 knots from Port Alexander, Sitka, outside there of Cross Sound, with waves 11 to 12 feet. And then Wednesday, with that second low coming up out of the North Pacific, we're going to have even some stronger winds. We're looking at 30 to 35 knot winds across the inner channels from the southeast on Wednesday, with gusts as high as 40 to 50 knots, especially as you go up from Stevens Passage up into Lynn Canal. And then for the outer coast, generally from Port Alexander, Sitka, up to Yakutat, we're looking at south to southeast gales of 35 to 45 knots and even locally to 50 knots. And waves could build as high as 20 to 30 feet, especially there outside of Yakutat and west of Cross Sound. So that's going to be some very active weather, and you're also going to have periods of some heavier rainfall along this outer area of the northern Gulf Coast and northeastern Gulf Coast. And looking then for the northwestern Gulf, Tuesday, outside of Hinchinbrook entrance to Kayak Island, easterly gales of 35 knots, waves 15, 16 feet, 30 knot winds within Prince William Sound. Be very wet, Whittier down towards Seward. Some moderate and locally heavy rainfall there for Tuesday. On the other side, northeast to north winds 25 knots down the length of Cook Inlet, and you get out away from shore there. Waves will be running 7 to 8 feet on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, you have one of the old low over here with the second one kind of coming up in here toward the central Gulf. So winds are going to be northwest just 10 knots within Prince William Sound. Wednesday waves a couple of feet. Outside of Hinchinbrook entrance, north-northwest winds 20 to 25 knots, waves still 10 to 12 feet. And then Cook Inlet, kind of a mixed bag of winds around 10 knots, but waves generally running a couple of few feet there. And across Kodiak Island on Tuesday and east of Chicknick, northwest winds to 20 knots, waves 3-4 feet, though higher east of Akiak and Kodiak City, 8-foot waves out there in the Gulf. And then winds are going to try to shift back around to the southeast at 15 knots, either side there, Cold Bay and False Pass with waves 3-4 feet. Winds on Wednesday will be west-southwest 15 knots around Kodiak Island, and then variable 10 knots and kind of more southeast to east off of Sandpoint and False Pass waves. Generally a couple of feet, though it could be a little higher there down near False Pass, 5-6 feet. And then the Aleutians on Tuesday, we have that stronger low situated there just kind of to the northwest of Shemia. So out there, gale force winds of 35 to 40 knots, southwest to westerly. As we come eastward, there's going to be a front working its way eastward. We have southeast winds to 30 knots on Alaska, shifting southwest, 25 to 30 knots there as you get near and west of Nikolsky, and then falling off to southwest to west at 20 to 25 knots, Atka to Adak. And for Wednesday, winds will come down across the region as the system won't be quite as strong. Variable winds just 10 knots around the eastern Aleutians at Dutch Harbor. South-southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, Nikolsky to Atka. And then once we get back toward the circulation here, a mixed bag of winds that turn westerly, especially there west and southeast of Kiska to 30 knots. And along the west coast, well, we have first the Pribilovs and St. Matthew, northeast winds 20-25 knots, waves maybe 6 feet there around the Pribilovs. Look for a north wind of 10 knots out of Bristol Bay, a north wind of 15 knots out of Kuskokwim Bay, waves a foot or two. Along the lower Yukon coast in this wider expanse of Norton Sound between Nome and Kotlik, we're looking at northerly winds 15 to 20 knots and waves 3 to 4 feet. For Wednesday, winds will be easterly 15 knots around St. Paul, St. George. South wind into Bristol Bay, just 10 knots, waves a foot. Southeast winds 10 knots around Kuskokwim Bay. And then further north, winds are going to be northeasterly out of Norton Sound and along the lower Yukon coast at 10 to 15 knots with waves of 2 to 3 feet. Stronger to 25 knots and 7-8-foot waves out there toward St. Matthew. And then as we go up through the Bering Strait, winds on Tuesday will be northerly at 10 to 15 knots with 2 to 3 foot waves. Strongest winds as you round the Lisburn Peninsula at Cape Lisburn up to Point Lay off Wainwright. Look for northeast to east winds of 25 knots, waves 4 to 5 feet. And then along the Arctic coast, Utqiagvik to Kaktovik, there the Beaufort Sea coastline, east to northeast winds 10 to 15 knots. And for Wednesday, Kaktovik to Prudhoe Bay, look for east-northeast winds 10 to 15 knots. Those northeasterly winds will increase as we head southwest there at Utqiagvik off of Wainwright, Point Lay. They could be upwards of 25 knots with waves of 6-7 feet. And then coming down through the lower Chukchi Sea, winds will be northeasterly at 15 to 20 knots on Wednesday. And then finally, off of the west side here, offshore flow off of the west side of the Seward Peninsula, Wales down to Port Clarence. We're looking at northeast winds 50 knots, turning more northerly on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, where winds will be out of the north on Wednesday at 20 knots with waves generally running 4 to 6 feet at Savunga and Gamble.